Oftentimes, those teachers that are life changers, it really has more to do with what they taught us about life. It has more to do with the fact that we were able to build a relationship with them. It actually, to me, comes down to this foundational element that the teacher purposefully builds in time or structures a portion of their day for relationship building. Whenever you can start making your students feel seen, you make them feel valued, it actually is amazing how quickly they will engage with you in the learning process. Hey, teachers, welcome to the Lead, Serve, Teach podcast, where we explore the intersection of leadership, education, and personal growth. I'm your host, D.Paul Miller, and I'm so glad you've joined me here for some powerful conversation and, as always, a little bit of real talk. We're starting a new series here about engaging learners effectively in today's classrooms. During my time in the classroom, I struggled with it then, and it's an ongoing issue that many teachers struggle with and are looking really for what are those best practices? How do we keep students engaged? How do we engage learners in, well, cognitively complex tasks and those hard things, that heavy lift of learning? We have to figure out a way as educators to make sure it's the students that are doing that heavy lift of learning, and they must engage. They must actively participate in that process. And so we're going to do a little mini series here on talking about some of those basic foundational elements of engaging learners, of making sure that they are active participants. And so I'm so glad that you've joined me here for episode one, which is really focusing on what I consider to be the most foundational element of engagement, and that's building relationships. If you watched any of my podcasts before, or read any of my books like Hey Teachers Don't Quit, you'll know very quickly that I believe in the power of relationship. I remember in my senior year of high school, I had actually transferred from where I had been attending since middle school. Not one of the easiest transitions for sure, but it was amazing. I can remember a specific teacher, Mr. Wood, specifically had him for a government class. And it was so strange. Every day we would come in there, and first thing he would have this classical music going on in the background. First couple of days you're in there, you're like, what is this music? Like, we're high schoolers, we're not into classical music. And that's how he started every single class. He'd let it play for just a minute or two, and then he would cut it off. And then he would talk to us about that specific composer, or he would talk to us about that specific portion of history, or he would talk to us a lot of times about maybe the politics of the day that was ongoing during the time when this piece was written, and some connection to history, some connection to humanity, some connection to, well, actually it was a connection to us. He made sure that he was kind of using classical music of all things to help him teach a government class, yes, but he was also using classical music to actually open the door for building relationship with us as students. It's very interesting, and I remember it so very clearly. He was one of the most influential teachers I had. It made me feel like somebody was seeing me. Somebody actually cared. Somebody wanted to take the time because, again, each of these composers, each of these pieces of classical music that he was sharing, it really wasn't about the music. It was, again, more or less opening that door at the beginning of every class, because inevitably he would ask questions. He would take that political element, he would take that musical element, he would take, sometimes the historical element, whatever it was. He would take that and he would slowly transition into opening it up to class for us to kind of share our own thoughts, not necessarily about the music, not even necessarily sometimes about the composer, but actually this connecting element to us. It maybe only cost him, maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes at the beginning of each class. I realized this later on. He would purposely work his way throughout the class. So he made sure that each day it wasn't just the same students talking. Sometimes he would direct a question to a specific student. Sometimes he would direct a question to me, for example, and ask me to engage with him. What I thought, again, non-academic topic. And of course, he would always make the story interesting, and he would, again, relate it to something that was, well, relevant to us in this day and time. It wasn't about all that, though. It was about the engagement piece with us and building relationship, learning something about us, learning something about him as the teacher. Very, very strategic thing that he did every single day. It's quite interesting how whenever you can start making your students feel seen, and you make them feel valued, it actually is amazing how quickly they will engage with you in the learning process. Dr. James Comer famously once said, no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. I'm sure if I was sitting in a room with you all, a bunch of educators, a bunch of teachers, a bunch of leaders out there, and I said, "Hey, how many of you remember a teacher that made a difference, that just was so impactful for your life?" And boom, I'm sure so many hands would just fly up very quickly and say, "Oh yeah, I remember that exact person." Just like I remember Mr. Wood randomly sharing all these weird songs with us and using it as a place to kind of like to jump off the tracks, if you will, start talking to us and building relationships with us. Now, it's amazing how quickly I can remember that one teacher. And I'm sure you've got your example too. Those life changing teachers. It's not always about what they taught. It's not the math. It's not the classical music. It's not the government. It's not the politics. It's not the CTE, career tech ed course. Oftentimes, those teachers that are life changers, it really has more to do with what they taught us about life. It has more to do with the fact that we were able to build a relationship with them. It actually, to me, comes down to this foundational element that the teacher purposefully builds in time or structures a portion of their day for relationship building, for fostering relationship. If you're not doing that, I believe that you're actually losing one of the most effective ways to engage students. It's very easy for us as teachers to get in the mindset of bell to bell instruction. You probably heard me talk about that on here before in previous episodes. We should start the class with something academic, and we should be talking about that academic topic, doing something with that academic topic, engaging our students in that academic topic from the first bell to the ending bell. And while I get the idea is good that we should be focused on a clear academic topic and we should exactly know what our students should do, what our students should know, and that's all good, fine, and well. But I do find it interesting that as we lean more into bell to bell instruction and having such a great focus on a specific academic topic, that the more we do that, it seems like it's harder and harder to make sure the students are engaged in the learning. Unless we are purposefully building that in, it's going to be really tough to really engage them in the learning process, to engage them in learning the academic topic and mastering the academic skill. It's going to be harder. So I think it's worth our time as educators, worth our time as teachers to back up and say, you know what, pick something like, I don't know, classical music. Pick something you love. My teacher, Mr. Wood, he loved classical music. He didn't expect us to overnight become, man, we are connoisseurs of classical music. He was not there to teach classical music. He was using classical music as a tool to engage us, to build relationship with us, to build the foundation of what he was going to do each day in that class. So you've heard me talk about it on here before. Personally, I did life lessons with Mr. Miller. I would tell a funny story, a big mistake that I had made when I was their age. Sometimes I would tell stories of other individuals that had done great things or had made big mistakes. And each day I would start class with that. That was my classical music playing. And I would start engaging every student. Sometimes it was one or two just for the day. Sometimes there's three or four on specific days. And some teachers, I've seen some teachers do similar things at the end of class. Some teachers kind of speckle it in throughout their day. But the key is they're planning. They're purposefully planning to do relationship building activities throughout the class. They understand the value of relationship building. They understand the value that that has in future engagement when it comes to that, well, maybe what the students might see as a boring academic topic or a topic that they can't relate to. Man, it sure helps when you've got a real relationship with that student that you can leverage because you purposefully taken the time to build it. I'm just going to leave a couple of specific things with you. And as always, I want to give you a strategy that you can take and use. So, engagement again begins with connection. So students engage when they believe their teacher cares about them. If you're not already doing that as an educator and you just need a quick tool that you can put into play tomorrow in your classroom, I want you to start looking at something called a daily 2 by 10 strategy. Spend 2 minutes per day for 10 days in a row having a non-academic, that's the important thing, the non-academic conversation with one student who seems disengaged. So maybe start with your most disengaged student and plan to spend 2 minutes per day over 10 days. Non-academic topic. Maybe that student is involved with basketball. Maybe they play baseball in the week. Maybe they're in the band. Find out something that you can connect with them on. And again, this is not a whole class strategy like I've been talking about. This is a very direct strategy for engagement. The reason I'm sharing that, just this very focused, picking one student strategy, is because I want you to take this strategy, 2x10 strategy, and implement it and see what impact that has on their academic side of things, on their academic learning, and more importantly, their engagement with the rest of the class, with you as the teacher. So engagement doesn't start with technology, doesn't start with lesson plans, but it is important to plan for it. But in reality, engagement really it starts with trust. So tomorrow, pick one student and begin your 2x10. Again, I'll be on here sharing some more tips and strategies, and I hope that you will join me as we go through this engagement mini series. Again, it's a 4-part series. It's just the first part, and with each section, each episode, I'm going to be sharing quick strategies, something that you can take and use tomorrow in your classroom. And I'm hoping that you'll continue to build these engagement strategies and really see the impact that it makes. Remember, you're not just a teacher, you're a leader, you're a change maker. So keep striving, keep inspiring, and don't ever quit. I'm D.Paul Miller. I'll see you for the next episode.